Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has again rejected calls for a ceasefire with Russia, saying that it would only give Moscow more time to replenish its arms supplies. Zelensky has been touring Baltic nations, calling for more political and military support from allies in the region. Ukraine's government also wants to mobilize extra troops to fight the Russian invasion. Neither side is gaining significant ground in the fighting. DW's Nick Connolly visited Ukrainian artillery units near Bakhmut, who are into their second winter on the front lines.
You hear them before you see them. Given enough time, these men tell us, the mice nibble everything, from sleeping soldiers' fingers to computer cables. In an age of satellite internet connection, via this Starlink box, they're still waiting for an innovation to properly defeat rodents.
The cats that we brought down here, they all ran off. They were too scared of the rats. Sometimes a weasel comes by and helps us out with the mice. I don't mind the mice, really. They're pretty harmless. At least it's some kind of distraction.
With Russian drones ever present in the skies, this Ukrainian artillery unit essentially lives underground when they're not out firing at targets. A dozen or so men holed up together in a dugout several meters under frozen ground. Satellite internet connects them to their families, watching the lives they now can't be part of.
Sometimes I call my daughter and ask her how school's going, and she says it's Saturday or Sunday. Down here you lose track of time. Every day is the same unless you're outside doing your work.
During the summer offensive, they were able to advance to here. They built themselves this new dugout, knowing full well that their lives would depend on it. This winter, they're defending this position against Russian troops trying to take it back.
Just recently, a Russian shrapnel shell landed outside one of our dugouts. We weren't expecting anything. We were down in the dugout, but it was still pretty scary. You could see the flash, even from where we were.
Some of the original crew couldn't get used to the constant shelling and had to transfer to other units. But there's no criticism of those who left. One thing you hear a lot down here is that there's no such thing as an ideal soldier.
There's no point sitting around at home saying you're sick or telling yourself, I wasn't born to fight. No one is. You learn it all in the job, and if you don't learn, war won't forgive your mistakes.
Everyone is going to have to fight eventually, and there's no point trying to hide. That's the message these men have for their fellow Ukrainians as this war heads into its third year.
Ukraine Bureau Chief Nick Connolly, who filed that report, joins us now from Kyiv. Nick, we just saw you there in the trenches with the Ukrainian soldiers, mice everywhere, freezing cold. What was it like? What is life like for those soldiers on the front lines?
It's certainly not easy. It has to be said that it was a lot more pleasant underground, even with the mice, than it was above ground. Everything was frozen. There'd been fresh rain that had then frozen, so people were falling out over on the ice. There were questions about supplies being brought in on time because the roads were just basically impassable. I think for the most part, though, that unit specifically, people had had a few weeks off over the past year. They had been to see their families. Interestingly, though, people say that actually it can sometimes be easier just to stay at the front line than to go home, because 2 weeks just isn't enough time to properly let go of all that stress, that adrenaline. And often enough when they're back home, they can get annoyed seeing men their age going to gyms, going about their normal daily lives, going to work and not joining in the fight. So some of them even questioning whether it was really worth their while to go home, because it was just emotionally and physically kind of a difficult thing to do.
We heard one of the soldiers saying no one is born to fight, that it's learning on the job. Nick, we've heard much about the military struggling to recruit new soldiers. Give us a sense of how big the problem is and whether the recent plans the government announced can likely address it.
Well, the thing is, Sarah, right now you have lots of people who have been fighting since February 2022, who have basically been there now for 2 years. Lots of them are actually not young at all. This is largely a middle-aged man's war. Right now, mobilization only starts at the age of 27, and if you're a student, then you're protected from that. So you see lots of men in their 30s, 40s, even 50s fighting. Some have obviously been fighting since 2014, since Russia sent those separatists into the east of the country. So lots of people who are very tired. And it is obviously a very controversial topic because lots of members of Ukraine's parliament are trying to block these new efforts to increase the draft. There's also a fear of the demographic impact in the future if you have people who haven't had families yet potentially being wounded or losing their lives. So this is basically the central issue in Ukrainian politics right now and something that hasn't been resolved.
Kyiv Bureau Chief Nick Connolly joining us from the Ukrainian capital. Thank you so much for that reporting.
Let's delve deeper with Marina Miron from the War Studies Department of King's College London. Welcome back to DW, Marina. What difference is this new security deal with Britain likely to make?
Hello, Phil. Well, this is an unprecedented step. The UK is being the first country to sign such a deal with Ukraine, and this is a long-term commitment from Rishi Sunak, pledging to stand with Ukraine as long as it takes and to outlast Russia. The aid has been increased to £2.5 billion, as we have heard, so slightly more than the past years. The problem here is it's more about strategic messaging. So if we take the aid that Ukraine will receive without the US aid, which provides the lion's share, and the European aid, it's still not going to make any difference to Ukraine. Besides, we don't know in what trenches and how and when Ukraine will receive this aid, specifically the military aid, such as long-range missiles and drones. It's more a message to Putin. It's a message to Ukraine, obviously, but more than anything, it's a message to allies. And Britain is trying to do what it's done with the Challenger tanks and hoping to resolve the current deadlocks, both within the EU and in the US, in order to liberate the funds to support Ukraine further.
Because this has been a problem with Ukraine's allies all the way through this. That even when the spirit is willing and the money is available, it comes in bits here and bits there, and not when Ukraine needs it, and it has to go through this committee or that committee.
Absolutely. It's a bureaucratic problem because in Europe, all 27 members have to vote for the aid in Ukraine. And we know Hungary has been vetoing it. And on the 1st of February, we will see how far the talks with Viktor Orban have come in order to see whether that aid, a lesser number, about 20 billion euros now, will be liberated for Ukraine. But again, it is not the only problem that Ukraine has. Even delivering missiles, artillery shells, and so on will be problematic because of the current global supply chain and the fact that they cannot deliver whatever they promise all in one batch, right. Meaning there will be different batches delivered over time, which makes it complicated.
Brief word then about the state of the Ukrainian military at the moment. I understand they've been struggling to recruit new soldiers, and this problem is, I presume, likely to get bigger.
That is correct. The new bill has still not been passed, and there are discussions on reducing the length of the draft and possibly removing punishments for those who are avoiding the draft. The problem is, again, will the people go? Because the people do not want to fight, obviously, and they risk a polarization of the society right now. And that's the one problem. And the other problem, there has to be money and there has to be time to train the people. So the new draftees will have to be equipped. Right. They need kit, they need training, and there is no time for that. So how that will go is problematic.
Thank you so much, as ever, Marina. Marina Miron from the War Studies Department at King's College London.
Thanks for having me.